we're here today with Andy Fragen. He is a trauma surgeon and also a plugin developer. He is the author of the popular plugin GitHub Updater for WordPress, which allows people to install plugins that are hosted on GitHub. And I think the last time I interviewed you, Andy, was the version 4.1 of that plugin where you were adding remote install. Is that right?
Quite possibly.
Yeah,
It was
about
a while
5 years ago. 2015, I think. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
As you said, a trauma and acute care surgeon. I come into the WordPress space basically as a hobby. As most people end up doing, you do some things to kind of scratch your own itch. I've been online and doing sorts of things with that for a while. Such that I want to say, I think the first time I had a blog, they were called weblogs, and it was 2001, maybe.
And then how did you get from there to WordPress?
I was working in a couple of different environments, let's say, and most of them were, they produce their own, they produce static files, so you have to FTP them up and down when you made changes, and it was okay, and it worked out, and they had templating systems and things like that, which made it for much more convenient than just hand coding everything. So I have created sites that have hand coded everything on. I got into WordPress sometime after Zen Garden became popularized, and I was looking at all that, and there seemed to be a lot of development activity around then, and at about the same time, movable type blew up. And I said, and I thought, okay, let me try and let me play with WordPress, because I don't really want to dig into the back end anymore, or, so I thought, and I made a WordPress site and exported my content out and imported it back in, and there I've kind of been ever since. First started playing in the back end a little bit, mostly with theme customization stuff, but just from the standard themes, the default themes. Because as a front-end designer, I am not by any stretch of the imagination.
So all of this you would do just in your free time when you get home from work and just fire up WordPress and go to town?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I look at computer programming and things like that as puzzle solving, and it's kind of an interesting way to occupy time and figure out something to do. We have a little aphorism in surgery: the enemy of good is better. I don't necessarily stick to that and plugin development, because otherwise it would we'd be at a standstill. Things would never get better or never improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now, as you said before, I think last time we spoke, we were at version 4 point something. I'm at version 9.5 something now on the updater.
Yeah, it's probably changed quite a bit since I've last looked at it.
It has. It's probably gotten a lot more complicated.
Mm-hmm. And I think you guys have what, 2,500 stars on GitHub now. So
yeah, it's just mind blowing. It's truly mind blowing.
So okay, so when did you start getting involved with the community then? I know you're connected to a few different WordCamps. In your hometown is Palm Springs, California.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've always tried. There was a time, I want to say 2014 or so, when I decided, this is all great, and I was, and I think I'd done a plugin. I think I'd done a plugin for the events calendar category colors plugin, which was a little before then. And I thought, look, if I'm going to ever meet some of the people that kind of make WordPress, I'm going to have to kind of up my game a little bit. And for me, it was easy in that regard. I just started sponsoring WordCamps because, it was a lot easier to, in this case, send them a check and go in and say, hey, and be invited to the speaker sponsor dinner and meet people. And it's been a lot of fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It got me to the point where I've spoken at many different WordCamps on various topics, some of which probably were way technically over the head of a lot of the conference attendees. Some of those things happened when I figured out how to decouple language pack updating inside the GitHub Updater plugin. And in the US audience, there's just not a lot of translation call for people. So I think there was a lot of not really understanding some things. And it was like right at the start of the talk thing, oh, I've been gonna have to really explain all this stuff, not just some of it. But I've been, I try to go to all the my local Southern California WordCamps as I can. I sponsor all of them in some way, shape, manner, or form that I can. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've gotten a lot, developed a lot of great friendships throughout and enjoyed it thoroughly.
Cool. So, so I guess the WordCamp San Diego was postponed, not exactly canceled, but postponed due to the pandemic. How is that for you? Like when you look forward to those things as your kind of your hobby and your fun world away from work. How did you feel when you found out it was postponed?
I was a little disappointed, but as a lot of other camps started being closed or postponed right before then, especially WordCamp Asia. And I had some friends that were traveling there and they were asking what I thought they should do. And I'm like, pass on it. As much as I can tell you, it just doesn't sound like a good idea to get stuck somewhere, especially depending on when flights might close. I kind of had the feeling that doing a WordCamp in this season wasn't going to work out very well. It's disappointing. It's nice to see everybody. We still communicate either on Slack somewhere or in Twitter, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, I think everyone is still trying to stay connected, but you miss that, just the magical things that happen when you're having dinner after the WordCamp, or you run into somebody who you've probably been speaking to for years and you'd never seen them in person. Those are exciting things that that we have to just wait on, I guess. I don't know, a year maybe, or 6 months. I don't know where we're at as far as getting back to having real WordCamps.
It's hard to say. My guess is probably sometime next year. My other guess is they probably won't start doing it until they have some sort of vaccine out and they can be more preventative as opposed to just reactive towards things.
Yeah. Okay. So you're still working right now in basically on the front lines. Can you walk us through what a day is like for you at work?
I work with a bunch of folks, and we do trauma and acute care surgery. It's basically it is essentially shift work. They're 12-hour shifts, a morning shift, a night shift. Sometimes I work both day and night shift just because our shifts start at 5 a.m. and at 5 p.m. Start at 5 p.m. and at 5 a.m. It's been a little bit different lately because it's easier to get up and go in the morning and just at 5 p.m. check out with the oncoming person, and then go home and strip your clothes off and shower and come isolate in your little room. It's a little bit harder at doing the night shift because I essentially lately have been just staying until 4:30 in the morning, whether I have anything to do or not, because honestly, I don't really want to go through the cycle of, I leave the hospital, I change my scrubs, I come home, then I strip everything off and shower. And then I, wear those other scrubs back in the next day, if I'm working the next day. I just, before it was like, you come home, you get called back, you turn around and head back. It was a lot easier in that regard, or at least a little bit more convenient. If you didn't get called, you'd just be there, you'd be home. Now it's a little less so. I mean, for doing what we do, we have a level 2 trauma center here in Palm Springs in the county. We have a 15-minute response time for what we call a trauma code. So that's what their timing is like. It's gotten more busy. It's been interesting. I think the hospitals have taken a real a large step forward in being proactive in shutting down or at least diminishing elective services and things like that. I think that this huge surge that we were all anticipating never happened. Our hospital is just starting to open up again for elective surgery and things like that. We shut down whole services. We basically stopped admitting pediatric patients to the hospital. They transfer all of them over to Loma Linda or elsewhere. So it's to some degree it's somewhat inconvenient, but it is what it is for a while anyway.
So you haven't experienced in California where you're at the surge that they have in New York by any stretch?
You know, New York's an interesting case. There's 28,000 people per square mile. They have mass transit that packs people in like sardines. And I say that having been on the New York City subway system, and it's very convenient. It gets you where you want to go. It's almost more convenient than hopping in a cab, though there are lots of those around too. It's just that it puts a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't be next to each other. Mm-hmm. And when you have something they've clearly identified as being highly contagious, you know, it just spread like wildfire. And you know, some of it I also think is about the same time Bloomberg was still advocating going out and being normal, or that, you know, we decided over in California, maybe we ought to just kind of stay at home and do those things. And so it really hasn't, it has a lot, there's a lot of, it's a big state, California, there's a lot of cases. We have 1/10 of the mortality rate that New York has. We probably have 1/10 of the cases also. I think recently they said, you know, some epidemiologists said that New York seemed to be the center of where everything trafficked through from the United States. I could believe it, I guess, but
it is kind of a gateway to the world.
It is. It truly is. They pride themselves on that. I mean, you know. So we'll see. We had, I mean, our hospital typically has a capacity of about 389 beds. We would typically run about 360 full, because you have to have enough to be able to move people in and out and still be able to function. You can't run at peak all the time. We created a surge capacity of about 450, just finding other places to add beds and do those things. About the most we've had in the hospital at any given time, I think yesterday was like 240. So we're way below what our normal capacity is. I think about the most we've had of actual COVID positive patients has been about 9. Eisenhower has had about 2 to 3 times that at any one time. They also have a little older population than ours is.
So, but despite that, you're still having to work like head to toe PPE every day, just in case?
Well, for instance, our hospital's been very good about, I mean, all these horror stories you hear on the news or you hear on Twitter about people, administrators taking masks off of people or threatening to fire, never happened at our facility. You know, our hospital is run by a large a large national chain, right? It's part of who runs the hospital. Never have they ever told us we couldn't wear this or couldn't wear that. And they've been very good about providing PPE. Typically you go in, you pick up they require masks on the floors, or just being in the hospital anywhere. If I usually wear both an N95 and a mask over the top, mostly to protect the N95. If I'm going into a room or an area that has if I have to see someone who's at what we call a PUI, person under investigation for COVID, yeah, I put all the stuff on. I put a face shield. I wear a hat anyway, but I put a face shield on. The face shield, interesting, is to protect the mask more than to protect you. But so I put a face shield on. I put a gown on. you know, at one point we were starting to have to reuse these very thin plastic gowns, and some of us were commenting, you know, they really should just get some reusable ones and just launder them. And I have no idea where the microphones were that heard it, but about 2 days later, that's what happened. And so we essentially don't have some problems with PPE because, you know, for instance, all the gowns, they're all reusable gowns we have now. So there's plenty of them on all the units. You take them off, you wear them, you put them back in the laundry. They launder them and restock and replenish. Haven't had any problems ever getting an N95 mask. As far as reuse, I think the typical rule is one per, you know, you get one for the day, essentially. So
Okay.
it's not bad.
Yeah. So, so as far as sharing information goes, I've seen, you know, it seems like scientists are working together in an unprecedented way right now, trying to get on top of this virus since it's new and share, you know, whatever therapies they have that are working. Or are you in on that kind of sharing? Where is all the collaboration happening?
Honestly, a lot of it's probably happening in larger centers where they have a larger number of patients to do the studies. I've heard more about all the studies and stuff from following medical people on Twitter and them linking to the research or the papers or mostly the anecdotal evidence than anywhere else. Most of the sites that you try to go to, some of them will have, here's how we care for the COVID positive patient at institution X. And they'll give you this is what we look for, this is how we try to treat them, this is what we try to do with the ventilators, this is what we try to do with the medications. You know, the problem is, if you think about it, we came up with this pandemic and this virus that we had no treatment for, none, and no vaccine for. And so there was a lot of, we don't know what we're doing, we're going to throw everything we have against the wall and see what sticks. What stuck early seemed to be hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. I am flummoxed to see on the news how people are saying, oh, how this medication might be dangerous. This medication that people have been taking for 50 years, and some of them daily for 50 years. And it doesn't have, you even give it to pregnant women, for crying out loud. And there's very few medications that are considered safe in pregnancy. This just happens to be, you know, it's just amazing. And it's like, there was too much, you know, does it actually prove something? I don't know. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that says that people have done better when they get early treatment with it. I think the remdesivir is a much better, it's been studied a little bit better. I believe it was one of the first medications they were using for the Ebola as well. And now they're basically kind of trying to crank it out and give it to as many people as they can. But like anything else, if you don't give some of these medications early enough in the course, it almost doesn't matter what's going to happen. And there were some studies that basically did that. I want to say there was a California VA study that they were really giving bad news about hydroxychloroquine to, because they were giving it to these patients who were already intubated and not doing well and just about ready to die. And you know what? They died. And so their conclusion was, it must not work. The better conclusion is we had a really poorly designed study.
Yeah, and the testing isn't where it should be, to where, you know, we could reach people as early as they need to be reached, I think.
And that's the other interesting part. You know, for a while when this stuff first came out, I muted the word COVID-19 on my Twitter account. I was just tired of it. That lasted for about a day. And I thought, you know what, I'm not, this is where I'm going to get probably the most current information on things. And so I unmuted it. I've been watching, following, and looking and doing those sorts of things. I was looking at a couple of sites that were showing all the trends and everything else. And honestly, showing me how many people have come up positive isn't really helpful. I mean, I'm not, as I tell people in the ICU, you have to be meticulous and you have to take care of, you have to look at everything every day. And so what we're doing is we're looking at trends, we're looking at changes. So what I'd like to see is what's the daily change? For a while, Cuomo was giving you, this is the daily increase in hospitalized patients, and this is the daily increase in ventilator usage of COVID patients. And that's actually decent data. You can actually tell something more from that. The death rate, it's a lagging indicator, probably more of who's been sick for the last 2 to 4 weeks and who got really sick or came in really late and got really sick.
So when you're looking on Twitter, you're weeding through a lot of information, people's opinions. There's some experts, but a lot of experts don't have the time to tweet about this stuff. So it's just, how do you personally, I mean, how would you suggest somebody find the right information? There's so many conspiracy theories flying around now, and it's what they're calling, I guess, an infodemic, that many intelligent people are sharing these kinds of things without knowing or fully vetting the information that's within these kind of videos, and just screenshots of wild, just some wild stuff out there. How do you wade through it?
To some degree, the people who are actually doing studies are going to be major universities. They're not going to be someone's lab or someone's think tank or someone's group. I remember my wife telling me, "Oh, you shouldn't take ibuprofen. It's bad for you." I'm like, "Where did you hear that from?" And I'm not going to knock Facebook, but she heard it on Facebook, and I had to Google it. And it was at the time, this is probably a month or so ago. And at the time it was a study of like 4 or 6 patients in France. And I'm like, what kind of conclusions do you want to draw from that? I don't know. And so I'm like, and so I told her, I was like, there's no data for this. There's no great data. There's just a correlation, right? And so when you're doing data, when they do data analysis for things like this, you're looking for a causation, not necessarily just a correlation, because the correlation for they have right now is people over 65, people with multiple medical premorbidities, they don't do well, or they don't do as well. Those you can do certain things with that data that you can't necessarily do with other data, but you're not basing treatment protocols on that.
So what would you say to a friend or someone who would say that all of this is just a hoax, and that the pictures from hospitals are fake or just created to mind control? What would you say to somebody who's convinced of those things?
The interesting thing is there was I don't even know what to call it, going around on Twitter. They were saying, go to your hospital, go outside, take pictures, go in the lobby. It's empty, nothing's happening. This is all fake. And I can assure you it really wasn't fake. Part of the problem is that, well, it might be very contagious. What we didn't know was, if you were infected, how symptomatic were you? Because clearly the only people that came to the hospital were the symptomatic ones. And so you've now selected out for a subset of patients who are sicker, for lack of a better word. They did some studies both in Northern and Southern California, where they were doing, and I think in New York too, where they were trying to do antibody tests, serum IgM, IgG levels. And, I'm reasonably certain that people listening to this are going to have their heads spin and have to look up lots of stuff. But IgG and IgM are antibodies that tell whether or not you have been exposed to a virus and how long ago, essentially. If you have positive IgM, it's a more recent infection, usually within the first 6 weeks or so. IgG is a longer infection, usually after 4 to 8 weeks, after 8 weeks or so. But what it means is you were exposed to virus and your body had a reaction to it, developed antibodies, and fought it off. And they found that the rate at which people had antibodies was about 38 to 68 times higher than what they're reporting of actual cases, which clearly drops the case rate mortality down a lot, but it doesn't, it still doesn't tell us the whole, it still tells us, what it really tells us is that this is probably a lot more contagious than we thought. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who were exposed that were basically asymptomatic.
Yeah, it's such a wild card kind of virus. I mean, the symptoms are changing all the time. They've got, is it a dry cough, or is it, bright red toes, or what is it? There's so many different ways that it can present. So yeah, it's just, it's wild. You could, there's so many asymptomatic people, and then there are people just having the worst time of their lives, and it's like you don't know where it's gonna strike. So it's tough. I think it's tough. A lot of people are grabbing onto simple answers too, because they want to feel some sense of control.
I think the simple answer is you do what you can to keep yourself, to minimize your own risk and the risk of those around you, primarily your family. It's kind of why I'm been hanging out in a single room in my house. Now, am I completely isolated from them? No, not really. I mean, we share the kitchen, we kind of eat together, but I mean, I've been sleeping on an air mattress since mid-March. It's not exactly great.
Yeah. So when you get home and you start isolating, then is that like, do you just figure out something to do on your own, or are you working on your plugins, or how do you pass the time?
I've been doing a lot of that. It depends what's been going on the day. It depends when I'm, so it just depends on when I'm working. If I'm working during the day, then, most of the WordPress stuff doesn't happen on that day. If I'm working at night, maybe I'll get up and do stuff before I go into work. Somehow I found myself as a component maintainer for the site health component. I'm not quite sure how that happened really, but it seems to have happened.
That's
those meetings are.
You're a doctor, and you're maintaining site health component now.
I'll call you one better. I'm maintaining the WordPress beta tester plugin.
Oh, you are? Okay. I use that all the time. That's cool.
And fortunately, we've had some updates with Paul Biren, who's in the East Coast somewhere, in a very low densely populated area, as Paul keeps telling me, to where we made it so you can even pull up the betas, or you can be in the beta track or the RC track or whichever it is. But you'd be surprised where you get help from all over the place for different plugins or things if people want to fix things or want to change things. So I sometimes I run the core site health meeting. That's Monday morning for me. Various times vary, and I try to go to the core dev meeting when I can pop in.
Cool. So is that still providing you the same kind of outlet as it did before all of this crazy stuff started, or is that one place in the world where you still have some normalcy?
Yeah, but it's like anything. Developing a plugin and developing for WordPress core is a total different beast. I mean, if I have something for a plugin I want to push out and fix, I push it out and fix it. I've had patches and stuff for core that are supposed to go in early on 5.5 that are being looked at, but haven't seen anything going on. Haven't seen any work on or motion on for a month or more. And those are the one I did a lot of the patches for plugin PHP and WP compatibility testing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just finished the same thing for themes. Themes are much different.
Yeah, so I guess it is kind of slow moving sometimes on those tickets.
It is, and you just keep bringing them up, and I'm not concerned that they won't go in. I'm more concerned that, hey, if there's something I could be doing to make it better, that I haven't really gotten any feedback on that lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess with the intersection of these two worlds here, WordPress' mission is to democratize publishing and make it possible for people to share virtually anything. With all the conspiracy theories that are running rampant, it's becoming what some people have termed an infodemic. Do you feel, I mean, as a healthcare worker, does that affect you at all when you see those things on the web? How do you think the web can successfully balance freedom and personal responsibility during a time like this when people might be at risk just by reading something, someone shares something and they take it to heart and they go buy a drug mentioned, or how,
or decide to ingest fish tank cleaner.
yeah. I mean,
I
as
mean,
far as for like publishers and people who encourage the freedom for people to share ideas and that kind of thing, how can the web better support that and at the same time,
without some sort of monitor or censor, they can't. You can publish. That's the whole beauty of democratized publishing from WordPress.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can spin up a site and print whatever poetry or masterpiece they want. At the same time, they can publish whatever filth and detritus that they want. It's just there's just a huge amount of material, and the cream usually floats to the top, and so that the good people that the good stuff usually people will point to more, will read more, and we'll get more exposure, so more people will see it. A lot of it, unfortunately, for the user or the reader that doesn't really have any experience in the area, wait for the second, third, or fourth post about something from another source. Don't believe don't believe everything you read first time around. There was something about, I can't remember the woman's name, Micelis or something. There was some nicely produced video about how the vaccine industry was like shutting her down and had her arrested and this and that. And my wife pointed me to it, and I said, it's garbage. I said, it's garbage. Just all I did was look at the first cover thing, and then I looked at the Wikipedia page for this person, and it didn't make sense. But the
Yeah, a
problem
lot
is,
of it just takes 30 seconds of Googling and
I want to say Snopes even did something on it the other day, and to just say how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is you're not going to know. As someone once, I want to say one of the Bluehost did a thing, explain what you do in a very short sentence. And I said, I fight Darwin. Because, when people do silly, it's the classic hold my beer, right? After they finish having someone else set down the beer, then they come and see me because they've done something really silly and managed to damage themselves in some way, shape, manner, or form. But you can't stop people from doing stupid things, and they don't even have to be told directly to do stupid things. There's some, take for instance these people that drank the fish tank cleaner. Now, nobody said go drink fish tank cleaner. What they said is chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine have shown some efficacy in treating this drug. And I'm reasonably certain that most normal humans wouldn't think that fish tank cleaner is a drug or a medicine to take. And there's even something lately about maybe someone was trying to use that as a great excuse to knock off their spouse. I don't know.
Yikes. I guess the quarantine's getting to some folks.
Might be. It might be.
So as a healthcare worker though, how do you feel when you read those things? Do you feel, I mean, do you feel frustrated? Do you feel like there's an extra battle on top of your daily work that you already have to do?
In my case, no, because I mean, they had us all prepared. I mean, our group does a lot of critical care. So we take care of people on ventilators not infrequently. We were, of course, tapped to help out should there be a surge and should there be a lot of ventilated patients, and that we would help manage any number of them. We never got anywhere close to the actual numbers where it worked out that way, but that was as close as my group essentially got involved in it. Otherwise, I mean, I've had several people who were persons under investigation who I've had to see for consults for various things. I had one trauma patient I admitted who I immediately had to rule out just because based on his CAT scan. It wasn't really related to injury, but it looked like he had this rip-roaring pneumonia from other things, and why take the chance, right? So, but some of these they just come in, right? In the ER, they've done a very good job of, they catch people outside. I mean, fortunately, I live in an area where you can have people outside day or night. And right now, triple-digit heat, the only thing you worry about is, are they going to get sunstroke? Well, you get some tents and some fans, and you've got stuff cool down. But they immediately categorize them as they're either going to be under investigation for COVID, in which case they, as they say, go into the bubble and get tested and everything else, or they go through the regular ER. Well, the trauma patients don't necessarily go into the bubble. Mm-hmm. They just come into the regular part of the ER because that's what they are. We may move them there later, but so
or like ones who just break their arm, or there's gunshot wound and they may be asymptomatic as far as the COVID goes. I mean, you're still at risk there, I guess.
I will tell you that essentially everybody in the ER is wearing both an N95 and some sort of face covering or a shield in addition to it when they go see patients. Obviously, the ones in the bubble are also wearing gowns as well. Most of us aren't wearing gowns otherwise, but essentially you see a patient, you wipe everything down. You see another patient, you wipe everything down, and you keep going like that.
So does your facility have set up some form of like mental health care for, I mean, going through this all the time and the anxiety and the people self-isolating from their families? Is there anything set up to help folks with their mental health?
There is. They've had, they sent out emails for a while. They were doing it every day. They're down to like 2 or 3 times a week now. Telling us what the current status is and if there's anything new that we're doing, and where to go, or if you have issues or problems or things like that. Our county medical society does that also for us. Sends out, if you get the emails from them, they'll send out those things. I mean, for lack of a better, as I said when we were DMing, it's amazing what you can get used to, right? A lot of these things, affect people in different ways, and for better, for worse. Some of these things have never kind of bothered me. I mean, the training is hard enough. I mean, wasn't this 80-hour work week that we had when we were training, as we like to tease. My work week was limited to 168 hours in a week. And that's only because that's how many hours there are, right? But because of that, you learn to adapt a little bit better, I guess. There's just things happening. As I like to say, if I'm having a bad day, somebody else is having a worse one. And so you just, you are there to take care of them and to, fix them as best as they can be fixed, if they can be fixed. We recently had a case where, I got called in the operating room by one of the junior guys to help with the case. And I mean, honestly, there was not much we could do to fix the problem, because there was just, in this case, so much recurrent cancer everywhere that we just couldn't do what we needed to do, and leave the patient in a condition that would be survivable.
Yeah.
Those are hard decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're basically telling now the patient and the family, it's like, I'm sorry, there's nothing more that can be done.
Yeah. So basically your training is what's prepared you, and you're being adaptable.
To some degree. I mean, I'm sure I'm different than others in the field that do the same thing, but for the most part, when we're working, and we don't necessarily pay attention to all the kind of extraneous things that are going on around. You're kind of in the moment and doing what you need to do to get the work done and take care of the patient.
And how's your family coping during this time?
I guess they're doing okay. I mean, it would sure be nice to hug my wife once in a while. I kind of haven't really done that in a month or more.
Yeah, that's a long time.
My daughter's back was back from spring break at college. She's in finals week now here, doing it all remotely, because they had done remote classes. And it's interesting, the president of the university has been on news lately telling everybody how they're planning on going back to, he's a heart surgeon, is the president at the University of Arizona. And they've developed testing. Basically, they say we're going to test everybody who comes back, and all the staff, all the students. And if someone has a thing where, someone's positive, we're going to put them in a dorm and quarantine them somewhere, or provide for that. I'm like, that sounds great.
Yeah. I haven't heard of that approach yet, but that's interesting.
I could be wrong in the details, but that's kind of how it sounded. I'm just excited that they're going to be able to go back. I mean, it's, it's my daughter's first year of college. So it's, half the year was there and half the year was home.
Yeah.
Or a little less than half the year was back home. I really feel sorry for all those seniors who are graduating. Mm-hmm. I mean, they miss out on all that spring stuff in their senior year, including graduation.
Yeah, it's tough. They've worked hard for a long time and deserve to be recognized. And
mm-hmm.
It's tough. It's a strange year to be living through.
Yes, it's like, what's that old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times. These times are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say thanks for all that you're doing out there, and helping the sick folks and putting your life on the line. And also for everything that you've contributed to WordPress too. I wasn't aware of some of the different areas that you were involved until our chat today. And thanks for that, because I use those things every day. I appreciate it.
Wow. You're quite welcome.
Thanks for joining us and sharing part of your life right now during this crazy time.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.